The janitor I just fired is the founder of this company?
Preston had fired Bobby in front of the night crew. Now the paper in his hand would not stop shaking. Bobby stepped into the Lake Michigan wind, and he went looking for the one man Preston forgot was still alive.
Make sure to subscribe and like the video. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for being here, and God bless you.
By 3 in the morning, Preston Vale had every light on in the front office. The plant outside still breathed like an old animal. Pipes hissed. The blast furnaces glowed orange beyond the windows. Somewhere below, a forklift beeped in the dark. Preston did not hear any of it. He stood over Bobby's dismissal form, reading the last line again. Robert Bobby Kincaid, founder, Class A shareholder. The words looked foolish at first, almost funny. An old janitor with scuffed boots and a lunch pail from 1968 claiming he could touch the boardroom. But Preston had worked around rich men long enough to know one thing. Power often arrived in plain clothes. He pulled open the oldest file cabinets in the records room. The drawers smelled of dust, paper, and machine oil. There were safety reports from 1984, pension notices from 1997, yellowed inspection forms with coffee rings on the corners, but no founder shares. No Class A ledger. No original ownership book. Preston's jaw tightened. He called the plant's records clerk at home, then the assistant controller, then a lawyer in Chicago who charged more per hour than most of the night crew made in a week. Find out who Robert Kincaid is, Preston said, and keep this quiet. On the other end, the lawyer asked, "Quiet from whom?" Preston looked through the glass wall toward the factory floor. The night crew had already seen the signature. "Everyone," he said. By sunrise, whispers had started near the vending machines. Bobby's name moved from one tired worker to another. Was he joking? Was he crazy? Or had the old man known exactly what he was signing? Preston ordered the dismissal form scanned into a private folder, then locked the paper copy in his desk. He told himself he was controlling the situation. But when he opened the company archive system, one warning flashed across the screen. Missing historical shareholder records. Contact legal custodian. Preston stared at those 4 words. Legal custodian. There was still someone outside the plant who might have the truth. And Preston had no idea Bobby was already walking toward him. Who was holding the paper Preston could not find? Bobby did not go home. He walked west from the plant, past the chain-link fence and the frozen loading dock. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through his faded navy work jacket. Snow gathered on his silver crew cut. His old lunch pail knocked softly against his knee. Gary was quiet at that hour. A diner on Broadway had just turned on its sign. Coffee steamed behind the window. A radio inside played an old Motown song, low enough to feel like memory. Bobby stopped outside the old Union Hall. The building was smaller than it used to be. Or maybe men just remembered their young years too large.
He stood there for a moment, looking at the faded sign, Local 310.
Then he crossed the street to a brick duplex with green shutters and a porch light that had burned since midnight. Walt Jennings opened the door before Bobby knocked twice. He was 81 now, thin as a broom handle, with white hair combed back and wire-rimmed glasses halfway down his nose. "Bobby Kincaid," Walt said. Bobby gave him a tired smile. "Morning, counselor." Walt looked at the lunch pail. Then he looked at Bobby's face. "They finally made a mistake?" "They fired me," Bobby said. Walt did not look surprised. He stepped aside and said, "Then you better come in before the whole city wakes up." Inside, the house smelled of black coffee, old books, and pipe tobacco. A space heater hummed beside a chair covered in newspapers.
On the kitchen table sat 2 mugs, already poured. Walt had been waiting. Bobby sat at the table but did not touch the coffee.
Walt reached into the cabinet above the refrigerator. Not the first shelf, not the second. The very back, behind a stack of church bulletins and a tin of Christmas cookies. He pulled down a wooden cigar box. The label had faded brown with age. Bobby swallowed. "You still have it?" Walt set the box on the table with both hands. "I told your father I would keep it," he said. "I told you I would keep it. And unlike corporate men, I know what a promise weighs." Bobby's rough hands rested beside the box. For the first time all morning, they trembled. Walt lifted the lid. Inside were papers tied with red string, a fountain pen, and one photograph from 1976. 4 young men stood beside fresh steel beams. One of them was Bobby, and the document underneath carried the seal Preston had spent all night trying to erase. What promise had been locked in that box for 47 years? Walt untied the red string like he was opening a church Bible. He laid the first document flat. Original Articles of Formation. Gary Lakeside Fabrication and Steel. June 14th, 1976. Bobby looked down at the paper. The names were still there. Earl Kincaid, Walter Jennings, Joseph Moreno, Harold Price, and beneath them, in blue pen fountain, was Bobby's own signature. He had been 26 years old then, broad-shouldered, proud, sure that steel would feed Gary forever. Walt tapped the second page. "Class A founder shares," he said, "voting control if the company ever reorganized without unanimous surrender." Bobby nodded slowly. "I never surrendered." "No," Walt said, "you did not." The kitchen went quiet. Outside, a snowplow scraped the street. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. The smell of coffee filled the room, bitter and warm. Walt slid another paper across the table. This is the one Preston Vale won't want anyone to see. Bobby read the heading, Founder Protection Clause. Walt's voice softened. Your father put that in after the first buyout offer. He said, if men in suits ever tried to strip the plant and throw the workers away, the founders needed one last lever. Bobby closed his eyes. He could hear his father's voice again. Keep your name on honest work, son, even if nobody remembers it. Bobby opened his eyes. What does it do? Walt leaned back. With proper notice, a Class A founder can call an emergency shareholder review. If fraud, concealment, or breach of stewardship is shown, that review can suspend board authority pending audit. Bobby stared at him. That means Preston? That means Preston's chair, the board's votes, the sale they'd been planning. All of it can be frozen. At the plant, Preston's phone buzzed with a message from Chicago. Found old legal custodian, Walter Jennings, retired union counsel, possible original records. Preston read it twice. Then he made one mistake. He smiled. Good, he whispered. Then we'll visit Mr. Jennings before Kincaid does. But Bobby was already standing in Walt's kitchen, holding the paper that could freeze the entire board. Walt reached into the cigar box one last time. There's one more thing, he said. Bobby looked up. Walt pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. On the front, written in Bobby's father's handwriting, were 6 words. For the day they betray you. Bobby did not open it yet, because outside a black company car had just stopped in front of Walt's house, and Preston Vale stepped into the snow. What was inside that envelope? And why had Bobby's father known this day would come? Preston thought he was coming to silence an old lawyer. But he did not know Bobby already had the founder papers in his hands. And he surely did not know about the sealed envelope from Bobby's father. That is where we leave it for today. If you want to see what Bobby's father wrote all those years ago, stay with this story. Part 3 opens at Walt's kitchen table, with Preston at the door and the future of the factory hanging on one envelope. If this story reminds you of someone who was overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside after a lifetime of hard work, give it a like and subscribe so you do not miss what happens when Bobby finally reads the words meant for the day they betrayed him.